Are you looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select two or more players, pick more or less on their projections for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the PrizePicks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, PrizePicks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/bluewire and use code BLUEWIRE. That's code BLUEWIRE at prizepicks.com/bluewire for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Kirk Your Enthusiasm. I'm continuing my off-season of talking to people about their teams, and today I'm joined by the coolest name we've had on the podcast, Jackson Gatlin. You may have heard him with Nick and the guys over on Locked On. He does Locked On Rockets. He also does the Locked On NBA pod on Mondays and all sorts of Rockets-related stuff. So you're literally the perfect guy to talk about Rockets with me. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Kirk. I'm ready to talk a little Houston Rockets, maybe talk a little Christian Wood as well, kind of prepare Mavericks fans for what they're kind of getting themselves into with him.
Well, guys, I'm unfortunately going to have to wait a little bit later in the podcast to hear the Christian Wood stuff. Not even going to give you the minute mark. You're going to have to listen to the whole show. So you're probably going to be third. This is going to go up next week. I'm going on vacation. I'm recording with some of my friends just about their teams. And so we've discussed Lakers. We've done Memphis Grizzlies, and now I'm pivoting to a Rockets and hopefully get Pelicans and maybe Spurs, but the Spurs are very sad, so there's not really much to say about the Spurs. The Rockets are a team that's kind of in if it kind of feels like ground floor type stuff, to where if you're looking to get interested in Rockets basketball again, now's a good time because the team has a couple of really spectacularly fun lottery picks. And it's kind of the season of no expectations. But I'm interested to hear about the Rockets offseason, including the draft, along with what you think about the team right now.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Kirk. This Rockets team is 2 years removed now, roughly, from the James Harden era, and that first year was the transformational year. You can't really count that as year one of the rebuild because they were still very much in flux. There was that weird period of time where they were like sort of pseudo competitive for like 15 games or so with John Wall, Victor Oladipo, and Christian Wood, and then that team kind of fell apart when Christian Wood got injured and missed 17 games, unfortunately. And they kind of made that hard pivot to being a lottery team and wound up getting the second overall pick in the draft, which became Jalen Green. And that kind of changed the trajectory of this Rockets franchise to where it was like very clear, very evident. All right, we're, the Houston Rockets are going full scale rebuild. They're going to, strip it down to the nuts and bolts and just try and build something up fresh from the ground up. And that led to a lot of question marks about guys like Christian Wood and what his future may have held in Houston. And that's why he's no longer a part of this Rockets team anymore. It's not because he doesn't have a lot of talent and a lot of, potential as a player. I still was very much a firm proponent of the idea that Christian Wood can contribute to winning basketball if put in the right situation, which is why I do think that the situation that he finds himself in now alongside Luka Doncic with the Dallas Mavericks could be almost the perfect situation for a big man of his talent level. But back to Houston, I mean, they have this just amazing core of young talent now where they've really crushed it in back-to-back drafts with general manager Rafael Stone. Just 1 year ago, they picked up Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, Josh Christopher, and Usman Garuba. Three out of the four of those guys have already, shown some flashes, and there's a lot of potential there. Unfortunately, haven't been able to see too much out of Usman Garuba just yet, although he did show a lot of potential when he was playing in the Olympics.
Oh my God.
Moments where
he was the guy who was single, so he was drafted year before last, right?
Yeah.
So Garuba was the guy that I had was super thirsty for, because if you watch tape of him overseas, he looks like he does Draymond stuff. He is crazy. He's
his
gonna be
defensive
fun.
potential is out of this world. Rafael Stone said that he is the best defender in the world, not in the NBA, which is high praise. So and I know you're gonna gas up your guys, absolutely, but we just haven't gotten to see a whole ton of that in Rockets red, in a Rockets jersey. Unfortunately, he's had a couple different injuries that have kind of sidelined him here and there. Okay. So, there's still some hope there that he can translate. And this season is going to be really important to just kind of hopefully just get a glimpse at what he could be for the Houston Rockets. And then they crushed it again in this year's draft, picking up Jabari Smith Jr. at number 3, who was, widely regarded for much of the pre-draft process as the consensus number 1 overall guy. To have him fall to the Rockets at number 3 was really exciting for me personally, because I had Jabari at the top of my draft board throughout the entire process, and I was actually lowest on Paolo Banchero throughout the entire process, I had him 4th on my board, even lower than Jaden Ivey actually. And then as we got closer to the draft, I realized I wasn't being as fair to Banchero as I was to Ivy about some of maybe their defensive deficiencies, albeit, and so I kind of eased up a little bit. I had them both on the same tier, kind of, 3-1, 3-2, or 3A, sure, 3B, if you will. But Jabari at number 3 was a really exciting pick. He's bringing a lot to the table. I'm much more excited about his defense after watching him play in Summer League, and also Tari Eason, who looked like he looks like
that's the kind of pick that makes me mad. Like the mid-round picks, or because when was he picked? Like 17th? Am I making 17th, that up?
17th, yeah, 17th.
Okay, so he was a guy at Summer League that just popped. I mean, he was everywhere, because in Summer League games, for anybody that didn't watch, effort just makes a difference. And effort plus talent is kind of terrifying. And it was really, really something to watch Eason. And it's just it felt like, and I mean, this is a preposterous statement for August, but who's going to listen to this? Because it's August. He feels like kind of like a steal of the draft type guy. Maybe I'm crazy.
No, I really don't think you. And I try to be as objective as I possibly can when it comes to the Rockets without being too much of a homer. I know that I lean into my homer tendencies just like everybody else does. Sure. Within their fandoms, within the market that they cover, whatever. You sit in an echo chamber enough of the same thoughts and opinions and voices, and you wind up kind of you have your own inherent biases that you try to get away from. But I do think that Tari Eason, from a lot of draft experts, from a lot of the people that I've spoken to, they are incredibly high on his potential. He has these insane measurables. We throw around the terminology, being able to guard 1 through 5 in the NBA. And I really think we use that phrase way too much, but Tari really can. He has the physical gifts to be that level of an impact player defensively. And we saw that on display in Summer League. And just the offensive package that he already has and brings to the table. He's got areas of his game that he's got to refine. He's not a perfect player by any stretch of the imagination, but there's so much to like about his game already. And then Ty Washington, being able to scoop up a guy who was projected to go, again, another kind of mid-tier, first round guy, 15 to 20 range, give or take. Maybe his stock fell a little bit in the draft due to some, late season injuries, due to some workouts that maybe didn't quite go his way. But for the Rockets to be able to scoop him up at pick 29 by way of the Christian Wood Dallas Mavericks trade, which is super fun in and of its own right. To be able to get a guy of that talent level who had, the season that he had with Kentucky, really solid point guard prospect, great feel for the game already. It really does feel like this doesn't always happen in the draft, but it felt like the Rockets not only got the best possible player, like BPA, at every pick that they selected, but also the best possible fit at every single selection for what this team needs. And it feels like almost overnight, the Rockets have kind of shifted their identity to where this season, I think we're going to see them take a significant jump as far as just what they're able to actually achieve defensively on a night-to-night basis. They were the worst team in the NBA as far as defensive rating is concerned, I think 2 years in a row, actually. And a big part of that is right that, they've been kind of a dumpster fire, right? In the post James Harden era, trying to figure out what direction the organization is going to go. Ton of young talent, trying to, really mold that under Steven Silas, former Dallas Mavericks assistant coach, trying to harness some of that talent. And that's really hard to do when you've got all these young guys. The defensive schemes are going to look like, a disaster at times, but getting guys like Jabari and Tari who pride themselves on defense, who can really, make their presence felt on that end of the basketball floor. And then having those guys kind of lead the charge defensively, and having guys like Jalen Green, who have been so outwardly spoken about wanting to be a two-way force, wanting to have an impact defensively, and doing the right things, right? It's one thing to talk the talk. It's another to walk the walk. And Jalen made some significant strides with his defensive play this past season as a rookie. And as he grows, as he adds more weight to his frame, kind of fills out his NBA body, he's got the athleticism, the physical gifts to be an impact player as a perimeter defender in this league. So I'm really optimistic about where this Rockets team could be, just a few years removed from now, as we watch these players kind of blossom into their own.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of things there that I want to follow up on. So the first is Steven Silas. I really liked Steven Silas in Dallas. We didn't really get to know a lot of Carlisle assistants, but Silas seemed like a really fascinating future potential head coach. And now that he is one, he went there, kind of Harden kind of threw everybody under the bus, so it was really sort of hard to judge that first part of the season. But what do you think of him as a head coach?
If I'm being completely honest here, Kirk, I think he's still trying to find himself as a head coach, right? That first season, I've said this so many times, it's really tough to try and, really glean anything from that first season. Sure. Because again, transformational year, you've got all sorts of different things going on in the aftermath of the James Harden saga. So I don't want to hold that first year against Steven Silas. So the way that I look at it is I kind of count this past season really as his first year as a head coach. And even this past year, he had a lot of things, a lot of different, variables that were having to be considered this past season. You had the whole, John Wall's being benched all season long so that KPJ can be given the keys to the offense. And he's, transitioning to his role as the point guard. You've got Christian Wood and the uncertainty regarding his future with this Rockets organization as they kind of transition towards what is effectively now the Rockets young core. And obviously now Christian Wood's no longer a part of that young core. Kind of bringing Jalen Green along, but also still having to balance how many reps you're giving to KPJ and his ability to handle and run the offense. There was just a lot of things that he had to balance here in this second year in Houston. I'll be completely honest, though. I haven't seen anything that completely blows me away to where I think, Silas is the guy. Like he's incredible. I do think I do think Rockets fans do not give him enough credit, him and the coaching staff, for the development of these young players. I do think a lot of Rockets fans kind of just chalk it up to, oh, well, these players were going to develop regardless.
Right. They play, they're going to get better. And that was the Mavericks offense went to sort of hell in a handbasket when, relative to what it had been, because 1920 offense for the Mavericks was really, really good. And
it was the best offense in NBA history to that point, right?
He was the driver. Luka was the point guard, but he was the driver. And so it's just that I think you give that guy enough bites at the apple. I think he figures something out. Well, that leads directly into my next question then, because the kind of the man of the hour moving forward will continue to be Jalen Green. And it seemed that he had a little bit of a tough start, but he really, he had some fun games down the stretch, like a number of 30-point outings. He shoots a high volume of threes at a really, remarkably effective clip. And I remember at one point in the year, he was not shooting the three ball well at all. So to end the year at 36% or whatever he finished at it's pretty dang good. What are kind of year two expectations from him? I mean, you mentioned defense a little bit, but I love young players when they talk about defense, because it's like, are you saying this or are you doing it? But what are your kind of hopes for Mr. Green in year two?
I think the important thing to know about Jalen Green is he lives the game of basketball, lives and breathes it, right? There's certain guys that, they do basketball because it's their day job, right? Sure. It's their 9 to 5. They show up, they do the work, they go home, and then they live their lives outside of basketball. Jalen Green lives and breathes and loves the game of basketball and sinks so much time into his craft, be it film study, be it working out in the gym, skills training, all of it. He's got that fire to want to be the best. And I think that is the thing that ultimately gives you the competitive edge at the NBA level, because there's so much talent in the NBA, right? But the thing that differentiates that talent is, do you have the drive to want to be the best? And so watching Jalen over the course of his rookie season and the strides that he took, the effort that he made, especially again on the defensive side, right? Learning defensive schemes, learning how to anticipate certain things, getting used to what other NBA teams were running, recognizing certain things. There was one practice where I asked Steven Silas about Jalen's growth, as a defender. And he was like, yeah, like he's picking up on concepts way faster than I really expected a rookie to, where he would talk about how earlier in the season they'd be going through, walkthroughs in practice, and Jalen would be kind of confused as to, okay, well, if this guy goes here, then I have to go here. I rotate this way. And then he was talking about their most recent walkthrough at that point in time. He was like, Jalen nailed every single assignment, understanding where to be, how to rotate, when to move, like when to dig, when to cut, when to cheat, all these little nuances of being a good defender. And so it's not just him talking about doing it, it's him actually doing it. And I do think that, I'll get to the expectations for next year in a second, but, I think there's a misconception about Jalen Green's season, because a lot of, NBA media kind of chalk it up to, he had a bad start to the season, or a bad half of a season, or he didn't turn it on until after All-Star break. He did have a bad start to the season, but it's been much more overblown than what it actually was. He had a bad 18-game stretch, and then he was injured. So across his 18-game stretch, he averaged 14 points per game, 3 boards, 2 assists, handful of turnovers. And the efficiency was pretty bad. It was 38% from the floor and 28% from 3-point range. But then when you go to the games immediately after he came back from his hamstring injury, which is literally just the rest of the season, you can chalk it up to a 49-game sample size. So much more than just half the season, right? Effectively almost, close to 2/3 of the actual season. And his numbers actually start to look really good. 18 and a half points, 18 and a half points per game, 44% from the floor, 36.5% from three, had 3.5 rebounds, 2.7 assists, and he cut down the turnovers to just under 2 a game. So, and then like you alluded to, right, he had that insane tear at the end of the season, the final 7 games where he averaged, an insane, it was like 28 or something points per contest. I'm not even going to try and
with nearly 40% shooting for March and for April.
From 3. The 3 ball
February too. Hell.
The 3 ball really came along, and that's what really helped to kind of start unlocking some stuff for him. Mm-hmm. And he's, worked tirelessly with John Lucas, one of the Rockets' assistant coaches, to refine that shot a little bit, make the release a little bit quicker. He had a bit of a hitch in his shot, a little bit, kind of like a small dip, where he'd bring the ball down. And he kind of eliminated that from his shot, from his gather, especially on catch and shoot opportunities. So he has put in a ton of work. And I do think that one of the things that I've kind of looked at is Anthony Edwards had a very similar rookie year to Jalen Green, where they kind of were both brought along a little slowly at first. And, Ant kind of struggled out of the gate, right? He was coming off the bench at first, then gets injected into the starting lineup. And the Wolves really brought him along kind of slowly. And you saw the benefit to bringing him along slowly when he hit that burst, in the second half of his rookie season, and then took that insane leap this past season in year 2. And that's kind of how I'm expecting Jalen Green to mirror that growth. Is Jalen was brought along slowly, which I do think Steven Silas deserves credit for, because Silas kind of forced Jalen to learn how to play off the ball by not just, he could have just given him the rock and said, all right, go out there, 40% usage rate, get up 25 shots a game, and Rockets fans probably would have loved it, but his efficiency would have sucked. And would he have really been learning how to be the best version of himself?
Right.
Probably not. And so I do think that's an area of development that Silas absolutely deserves credit for, because now Jalen is both adept at, moving off the ball, finding those windows to kind of reposition himself offensively, which is a skill, to be able to move without the basketball and find open spots on the floor and be in the right position for a kick out pass, for a wide open opportunity to shoot a 3, or to then attack off the catch and catch the defense sleeping or off guard. We saw that kind of happen as the season went on with Jalen. And then on the ball, his reads, his ability to operate out of the pick and roll, learning how and when to attack, just got better and better as the season went along. It really kind of came to a head when Jalen had an overtime game against the Lakers here in Houston, where he just took over against LeBron James and the Lakers, which at the time, it's not much, right? Because there was two lottery teams duking it out in March. But it was exciting to see Jalen kind of have that moment where he had 19 points over the course of the fourth quarter and overtime, and 10 straight points in overtime to put the Lakers away. And that was kind of his all right, I'm here. I'm Jalen Green. This was my coming, welcome to the NBA moment. I took over the game. And to see him kind of have that growth and get to that moment in that game was some really exciting stuff. So I'm expecting, again, a year two jump, very similar to what we saw out of Anthony Edwards. I'm kind of projecting him to finish at least, or I'm projecting averages of somewhere like 22-ish a game, I think is well within reach if he's getting, enough shot attempts, which I'm expecting him to have at least somewhere 18 to 20 something attempts per game. So 22 points a night, maybe, handful of rebounds, handful of assists every single game. And if the 3-point percentage can stick, then he is going to be a nightmare to defend.
Sure. Well, I think you sort of answered my question, what you're talking about. He's pretty definitively a shooting guard. Is that if I know we don't really like labeling players, but if you had to, would you kind of consider him a shooting guard?
Yeah, right. It's so tough with like the traditional like 5 position labels anymore. It's much easier, I think, to label somebody as like, would he be a primary ball handler? Is he a wing? Is he, does he have the ability to be maybe an offensive engine like a Luka Doncic type, right? And I don't think I don't want to say that he couldn't ever become that, because I think he is kind of an underrated playmaker at this stage in his career. And maybe there's a point in time where,
Sure.
further down the line, the usage can be higher and you can just give him the ball and expect him to run an offense, over the course of a 48-minute game. And maybe that is his role further down the line. But right now, no, I think he fits more in that, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Zach LaVine role, where he's a 2 guard. He's a bucket getter. And it's not that he can't set up his own shot. He's not the guy that you want to run the offense through exclusively for, 35, 40 minutes plus a night, the way that you do with Luka or with Trey or, James Harden, LeBron.
Part of why I ask though has to do with like, who's your ideal, like, what kind of backcourt mate would you like for him? Because Kevin Porter is a Mavs fans. I remember there's a certain sect of Mavs fans like, how come we didn't pick up this guy? And it's like there's a lot of reasons. Kevin Porter Jr. is a tough guy to talk about. I don't really want to. So, what kind of backcourt mate would you like ideally prefer for him?
I think it's kind of tough. And I think this season's going to give us a lot more data points to work with on what is the best fit for Jalen Green moving forward, because I'm not even entirely convinced at this point, even though they looked really good together to end the season last year after kind of the veterans were shut down for the Rockets. And it was very much definitively every single night for the final like 7 or 8 games. It was like, all right, KPJ and Jalen are options 1 and 2, period. Everybody else is after them in the pecking order. And I think that was one of the issues last season, is the Rockets had no definitive pecking order, and that caused some issues just stylistically trying to figure out what the direction was for the team on any given night. So I need to see more out of them, because they are kind of duplicative of one another, right? They're 2 dynamic scoring guards. Right. Both have the ability to play make, both have the ability to score, at all 3 levels anywhere on the floor. So is that the best complementary piece to essentially have a Jalen Green clone playing next to him? Maybe, maybe not. A big part of that depends on how much of the Rockets offense can actually be kind of anchored and kind of run through Alperen Şengün as kind of an offensive fulcrum, being the passing big man that he is. Because it could be a really interesting offense, right? If you're running a chunk of it through Alperen Şengün and he's maybe your primary playmaker, or at least you kind of divide the primary playmaker responsibilities between him and KPJ, then you've got 2 dynamic scoring guards, and you don't have necessarily a traditional point guard or floor general out there, but it kind of maybe gives you a different look offensively than some of the other teams in the league. So I don't necessarily have a proper answer for you yet, Kirk, because I think we need to see a little bit more of that sample of what those 3 specifically look like playing alongside each other for a prolonged stretch of the season, and with adequate minutes for each of them, because you got to remember Alperen Şengün was coming off the bench last season, wasn't getting more than 20 minutes a night until the end of the season.
Yep.
So depending on how that trio looks will give us an inkling into, all right, is KPJ the backcourt partner for Jalen Green for the foreseeable future, or do the Rockets need to start shopping around and try and find a better, more complementary fit to him for the long term?
This has been good. This is somehow we've managed. I mean, you talk about the Rockets for a living, but I don't. And so we've somehow managed to do 25 minutes. This is great. And I'm going to get yelled at for this, but I don't care. So now we got the kind of question that the Mavs fans are specifically thirsty about, because I will tell you, Mavs fans are super high on Christian Wood, because Christian Wood might be one of the most exciting mixtape highlight players I've seen in a long time. He looks like he might be one of the best players ever if you only watch his highlight tape. I am ambivalent. Not that I think anything poorly about him. I just sort of want to come into the season with almost no expectations and be pleasantly surprised, then assign a level to him. And frankly, you and I mentioned this before we started recording, but I said I think the Mavericks need him to be good for the Mavericks to hope to go somewhere. And I just sort of wanted your opinion on the trade, and as well as sort of how you think he might fit.
Well, first off, I do have to apologize to Mavericks fans for the loss of one Boban Marjanovic. I know that was a hard pill to swallow. We will take care of him here in Houston if he remains a member of the Houston Rockets.
I bet he does. He's a culture guy.
I think he does. I think he's going to stick around. I don't think he's going to be like, he's not going to be part of the rotation or anything. He'll just, but he'll be the good vibes guy on the bench for sure. So I'm fully expecting him to stick around. I don't think anybody else from the trade is going to make it. I think they're all going to get waived. But as far as Christian Wood is concerned, I was much more excited about what his future would look like in Dallas when I thought that Jalen Brunson would also be returning to that Mavericks core, because it was like, all right, cool. You're fresh off of a Western Conference Finals run, and Jalen Brunson, borderline all-star caliber season. You're adding Christian Wood and Tim Hardaway Jr. to a core that just came out of the Western Conference Finals. You're adding two very good rotation pieces to a core that just did that, right? And maybe came up a little short against the Warriors, but that's okay, right? Luka's still incredibly young. You've got all the time in the world to be a competitive basketball team. So once the Mavericks lost Brunson, I immediately thought, oh man, because where I think the issue starts to stem with Christian Wood is I think he has almost the perfect skill set to be the third banana, but asking him to be your second best player, which I think at this point is almost a necessity for this Mavericks team to try and get back to where they were this past season. That's where I think you're going to run into some frustrations with him. Not that he doesn't have the skill to maybe put up the numbers that you need as your second best player, and especially playing alongside Luka, I think he's going to get some of the easiest opportunities of his career. We only had a 3-game sample size of Christian Wood playing with James Harden. That's it. That's all we got before James Harden mentally checked out of the Houston Rockets and just completely gave up on the team. But in those 3 games, Christian Wood looked absurd, playing with a guy that has that much gravity in the pick and roll, a dynamic guy who can be a rim runner, who can pick and pop, who can do all these different things offensively. Luka is going to make him look insane on offense. The frustrating thing about Christian Wood is he doesn't give you, and this was where I was like, all right, Mavs fans have clearly not watched any film on Christian Wood defensively. He is not a rim protecting big. He is not a shot blocker. He is not a good defensive big man whatsoever. He is a really atrocious interior defender. So he is not going to anchor the paint whatsoever. He is not a big like that at all. However, he is, where I do want to give him some of his flowers, he's a very capable switch defender. You put him out on the perimeter, he can keep up with smaller, faster players on the perimeter. He's light on his feet. He moves his feet well, good lateral quickness. He can keep up with smaller players, guards, and wings on the perimeter just fine. His issues are when you throw him at the 5 spot, or at the 4 against another bigger 4, and he will get abused down low, and he will get thrown around and ragdolled a little bit by some of the bigger centers in the NBA. Now, how often is that truly an issue? Against certain teams, right? If he's going up against Jokic or Embiid or a Steven Adams type, yeah, you're going to be a little frustrated at times. But how many teams really have a big that's a 20, 25 minute plus part of their rotation that's really going to, be able to ragdoll him like that on a frequent recurring basis? Not too many teams out of the league. I'd say maybe 5 to 10 teams out of the league have a guy like that that's part of their rotation on any given night. So for me, if Christian Wood can play the 4 in Dallas and somebody else can anchor that 5 spot, maybe it's McGee, maybe it's Dwight Powell, maybe they have somebody, just somebody else alongside him so that he doesn't have that burden defensively of being the 5 on the floor, then things could work out really well. But if he's playing the 5 for long stretches of games, you will become very frustrated with his defensive performance and at times his defensive effort.
So that was my main question.
You got to take it with a grain of salt, though, because, again, I do think there's something to be said for the fact that 2 years in a row, he was playing on the worst team in the NBA, right? Mm-hmm. That's, a change of scenery I always thought could do wonders for Christian Wood. think about if you're playing on a team that's playing for absolutely nothing, right? You're going to be a lottery team. You're not bound to do anything of any relevance anywhere. Playing on a team that actually has aspirations to be a top-seeded playoff team, championship aspirations, with a true alpha dog in Luka Doncic and an alpha-level coach in Jason Kidd, somebody who can really command the respect of that entire locker room. Not to say that Stephen Silas can't do that, but right, Stephen Silas is still very much, in the early years of his head coaching journey, whereas Jason Kidd, long tenured NBA player, right, Hall of Famer, he's able to kind of command the respect of whoever he wants when he walks into the room with somebody. Having two guys like that to kind of keep Christian Wood in check, put him in his lane and say, hey, this is your box. You stay in here and you do this, right? You don't bring the ball up the court. You're not running point. You're not isoing every other possession. You're going to do what we want you to do. You're going to pick and pop. You're going to hit threes. You're going to rim run. You're going to finish. And hey, we need you to play good defense, right? And I think that's something that Jason Kidd deserves a lot of credit for from this past season, right? Is he got the Mavericks to buy into a defensive scheme that worked really, really well, right? They were, they were a defensive-minded team for 2/3 of the season.
With
and
the
into
same
the playoffs.
guys that were not that good at defense. Like, they were like a 20th ranked defense the year before, and they finished last season somewhere between 8 and 10. And for a while, they were really good. And Kidd seems to be really about effort. That's why the effort question was kind of on the forefront of my mind, because Dwight Powell's a tremendously terrible defender, the same way you described Wood, but he made it work. And so it's about, playoffs is a bit of a different question, but for regular season, it's just about kind of making things work from night to night.
So much of defense is just want to, right? So much of defense is just, do you want to play good defense? Even if you don't have, the physicals that another player may have, or the size or the speed or the height, if you just try a little harder on defense, you can make an impact, or at least not be a net negative on the defensive end. And so much of that is about buy-in and want to. And now that Christian Wood has something worth playing for, right, now that he's not just out there to get his own numbers, he's still an incredibly talented, skilled player. And I am still cautiously optimistic that this trade will work out really, really well for Dallas. Because, again, I think that giving him a partner in crime like Luka Doncic, right, somebody to play off of that is that caliber of player, he's going to get a ton of easy looks offensively, and that's going to allow him to buy into the role that they need him to play to be successful on the defensive end of the floor.
That's very interesting. I had speaking with somebody earlier who just wondered if the Mavericks traded one kind of mercurial big and Kristaps Porzingis and another for Christian Wood, because the touches thing is just, if you play with Luka, your touches will come, but they're not going to. It's dicey, and
you're not going to get touches on your terms. You're going to get touches on Luka's terms. Like, if you play with anybody like that, you play with, like, yeah.
I'm sure you had this happen to you, where it's just like, I found these, and I'm sure y'all are lovely people who have Christian Wood stan fan accounts already letting me know how the world operates with Christian Wood. And I'm just like, I don't know if you're going to be very happy. But you know what, Luka, there was a 3-point stat where it's like guys who had the top 5 mostly open, I think it was, and 3 Mavs were in the top 5, and it's because of Luka. So it's like, this guy has a real opportunity to just be, he can do like very minimal, straightforward things while his box score will look incredible. So it might not be the highlight stuff he's hoped for in years past, but I know you're
and
kinda...
it's always tough, right? Because look, and to draw a parallel here, I mean, a few years back, right, when James Harden and Dwight Howard were teammates in Houston, the reason that pairing didn't work out is because Dwight could not keep his ego in check, and he wanted to be the guy posting up, and because he had Shaq chirping in his ear every other night on Inside the NBA saying, "You're not a real big if you're not posting up and doing X, Y, Z." So if Wood can buy into what his role is alongside Luka, he's going to put up 25 and 12 every single night, and he's going to look insane doing it. But he has to buy into that, right? He can't be the Christian Wood that wants to ISO every other possession. He can't be the Christian Wood that's a ball stopper at times offensively. And again, I'm optimistic that now having the chance to play for something of significance will do that for him, because he's never had that chance in his career, right? He's been a journeyman. He's had to fight and claw and grind to get his recognition as the talent that he is. And he finally got that chance with the Rockets. And he was supposed to be third banana behind James Harden and Russell Westbrook. That's why the Rockets got him. And suddenly that got shifted overnight, seemingly 9 games into the season, where suddenly he's 25 years old, he's putting up 20 and 10, and Rockets fans needed anything to latch onto in the post James Harden era. And that was in a way kind of unfair to Christian Wood, because that's not who he is. He's not a franchise guy. He's not your number one option. He's maybe not even your number two option, but he is a talented big who has two-way big man potential. Again, the interior defense a little sketch, but, has potential there. And I really am, interested to see how it all plays out in Dallas for sure.
That's been great, man. Thanks for taking more time than I'm sorry. We've gone longer. This has been fun.
No, dude, I've completely enjoyed the conversation. I'm always down to talk anything, especially Rockets related hoops, but NBA related hoops, anything, I might have to go wash my mouth out after this because I've said the word Dallas too many times in one sitting for my liking. But no, I have to take one pot shot at Dallas while I'm here.
Sure.
Otherwise my Houston fans are going to get mad at me. So
that's fine. No, I mean, Nick and Isaac give me grief all the time because I kind of hate the team as much as I love the team. And, it happens. Well, I'm going to post all the stuff to follow Jackson in the show notes. Does Locked On Rockets, does a lot of stuff, as I found out about 15 minutes before the show. Though I think I knew that anyways. I got to meet Jackson at Summer League via our mutual friend and internet super wonderful troll, Matt Moore. And this has been great. I'm glad we got to hook up. We'll probably talk, I'd like to talk closer, talk in season. So yeah, thanks for hanging out. And guys, we'll see how many more shows I get recorded. This is probably going to go up August 10th. I will be in the middle of the ocean, which sounds so sorry.
It sounds kind of ominous if you put it that way. So I hope it's a good.
But no internet access. I've not had internet access in like 12 years. So I'm either going to go insane or be the happiest person alive. There's no middle ground. All right, guys. This has been Kirk Henderson and Jackson. We have had fun, and this has been the Mavs Moneyball podcast, Kirk Your Enthusiasm. Please rate and review and subscribe and do all that stuff. But it's August. So if you're listening to basketball stuff in August, you're a hardcore fan. Everybody have a good day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.